Ever find a game that you wanted to like, but just couldn't? A game that had such great ideas, but fell flat on its face due to poor execution. Well, I have. Turning Point Fall of Liberty. After a generation with a slew of World War II shooters, developers began to stray away from the setting at the beginning of the 7th gen, Infinity Ward with Call of Duty Modern Warfare being a prime example. However, Codemasters went a different route using alternate history. What if the Axis powers had won World War II? This is such a great concept and there's so much you can do with it. It actually saddens me that this is the only developer that has even tried to use this concept in shooters so far. Anyway, this game's backstory is that in 1931, Winston Churchill died by getting hit by a taxi in New York, and without his charisma and leadership, the Nazis' Operation Sea Lion was a success. This led to a series of events in where the United States never entered World War II and the Axis took over Europe, Asia, and North Africa. And then in 1953, they invaded the United States. Now, this is only a brief description that the game gave us. Codemasters, for whatever reason, decided to put up a more detailed description on how the Axis won the war and how things led to the invasion online, instead of putting it in the game. Now, after this brief description, the game begins with the Germans bombing the Statue of Liberty to bits. Then it cuts to the point of view of your main character, a carpenter named Daniel Carson, and I have to say, this is a pretty good start to the game. I mean, here you are on a construction site in New York, and out of nowhere, these German planes, jets, bombers, and zeppelins invade your home and bomb the crap out of everything. So then you have to escape the construction site, and you are seeing your co-workers dying around you. But then you see that first German paratrooper land on your way out. And when you see him struggling to get his parachute off, it's time to get some satisfying payback. Unfortunately though, the game starts getting ridiculous from there. Your main character happens to be the main reason as to why this game's story is so ridiculous. Carson here is a carpenter that has had absolutely no military training whatsoever, and yet he seems to be a god of war. Throughout the game you see him survive all sorts of crap, such as falling from an elevator and having the ability to get shot and hit by many grenade explosions and just shrug them off after a few seconds. Now, you can call me out as I have praised other World War II one-man army games like Wolfenstein and Medal of Honor, but keep in mind, as outlandish as they are, you also have to take into account that your protagonists in those games are professionally trained Army, Marine, and Special Ops soldiers. And another thing is, in those games, unlike Carson here, they also have to rely on medical equipment. They don't just brush off shots as if they were nothing. The only explanation the game gives us as to why Carson is so tough, and I am quoting this from the manual, "Carson is no trained soldier, but raised on the mean streets of New York, he can take care of himself, especially when it comes to a fist fight." What a wonderful explanation. America doesn't need a military. All it needs is some carpenters, plumbers, and other tradesmen from New York, and they'll be just fine. In all seriousness though, Carson is the main reason I can't take this game seriously at all. As I said earlier, he's practically a god of war, and it really doesn't help that other characters in both the Resistance and the National Guard rely on him for everything, including rescue missions and assassinations. Your enemies are supposed to be professionally trained Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS troops, and they are having trouble with one measly carpenter. It's also silly to see the other Resistance members and National Guardsmen dressed and ready for combat, yet whenever you get a good look at Carson, he's dressed as if it's an average day. However, the game does have its moments. Throughout a couple of levels, you saw the effects the Germans had on civilians as they taunted, threatened, beat, and killed several of them. This creates one hell of an atmosphere, especially when you hear people screaming in the background. What makes this more haunting is the knowledge that in the 1930s and 40s, this was all too real. I also have to give this game props for having a mission where you assassinate the puppet president of the United States and blow up the White House. That takes balls. Sadly though, Codemasters messed up on the ending of this game, and this is mainly because of the character of Dan Carson. After the assassination of the puppet president, the Germans tried to nuke New York in retaliation. After finding out the Germans plan to do this, the resistance goes to the UK and Carson fights his way down the Tower of London to their secret lab and disables the 2 nukes there. He then stows away on the Zeppelin aircraft carrier containing the final nuke and mows down everyone in his way. Unfortunately, the nuke's controls get damaged in a firefight, so this forces Carson to sacrifice himself by blowing up the nuke inside the Zeppelin before it gets to New York. Now, I know that this ending was supposed to give off the impression that Carson's sacrifice will inspire other Americans to join the resistance and fight off the Germans, but thanks to Carson having no character development, I couldn't feel saddened by his death. In fact, thanks to Carson being portrayed as the god of war, I couldn't help but think, well, your Superman's dead, what are you gonna do now? Anyway, on to the more technical aspects of the game. Graphics-wise, this was a really bad use of the Unreal 3 engine. The characters look weird and just unnatural, and the textures of the game's environment tend to look rather blurry. I've also noticed a ton of glitches and errors in the game. These include bodies that float, bodies that phase through doors, flickering zeppelins, character outlines that you can see through solid objects, and sometimes the game freezes on the loading screen, forcing you to restart your PS3. The animations even look terrible. When a character walks, runs, or crouches, they just look laughable. They even look ridiculous when dying, and to add to this, for some reason their weapons just fly away from them. Thanks to this, the enemies look goofy rather than intimidating. Sadly, the technical problems don't end there. The hit detection in this game is very iffy. This is especially noticeable when enemies are behind cover. There are points where you can shoot an enemy, sights lined up and everything, only to find out that your bullets aren't hitting anything. You're only wasting ammo. I'm also not very fond of the aiming in this game. Normally in other shooters you're looking through the sight so you can aim at your target properly. In this you are looking so far at the back of the gun that you don't even know if you're properly aiming at your target. And to make it worse, the controls on the console versions of the game are also pretty jerky at times, making it even harder to aim. Despite all this though, you shouldn't have a problem taking out hordes of enemy troops. The AI is stupid. Sometimes they'll look at you and they won't even do a thing. This is just an over-glorified shooting gallery. While there aren't that many positive things I can say about the game, it does have a couple of things going for it. The game's soundtrack is beautifully composed, with a style fitting for a 1950s setting. I am also impressed with the game's choice in weaponry. For the Americans, we have some of their World War II weaponry, and weapons suitable for small resistance groups such as lever-action rifles and shotguns. And for the Germans, we have many advanced versions of the weapons used in World War II, for example the MP40 becoming the MP50, and several weapons that were being researched and developed but never made it into production, including infrared vampire vision goggles, super heavy tanks, various advanced jet fighters and bombers, troop transport zeppelins and aircraft carrying zeppelins. And believe me, throughout this game you see lots and lots of zeppelins. Now, while those are nice, those don't really affect the gameplay. So what good did Codemasters bring to the table gameplay-wise? Well, there is one good thing, and that's the grapple mechanic. When you grab an enemy, you have the option to either kill your enemy instantly or use them as a human shield. The human shield option is very useful when you're up against a group, as not only will you be using the mook to absorb gunfire, you'll also be using his sidearm to take out as many mooks as you can before your captive either dies or you run out of ammo. And the instant kill option is best used when there aren't that many Germans to take out. In certain situations, the instant kill option will be replaced by an environmental kill option. This has to be my favorite feature in this game. The grapple mechanic is something that really comes in handy, and it's a shame that there are not that many games that have a feature like this. I wanted to like this game, I really did. It had a few good ideas, the concept was brilliant, but unfortunately it was so uninspired, so poorly programmed that it wasn't even funny. I really hope somebody tries this concept in another game, because This is a really good concept, and I'd like to see what a game like this would be like if done correctly. But unfortunately, that's unlikely to happen anytime soon.